This is a special podcast looking ahead to GWEC's APAC Wind Energy Summit held this year in Melbourne, Australia from the 16th to the 18th of September. Get your tickets at apacsummit2025.com.au.
Hello, listeners, and thank you for joining us for another update from the APAC Offshore Wind Summit, which is happening in Melbourne, Australia, from the 16th to the 18th of September this year. We are joined at the desk by Mr. Morten Dyrholm from Vestas. Morten's the Group Vice President for Public Affairs, Marketing and Communications. Morten, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Stewart. It's a pleasure, as always.
Great. Hey, listen, I know that you are currently in Denmark, but you are planning to hold a Rex Talk, or what the equivalent of a TED Talk, what we call, I guess it's the Rex Talk is an equivalent of a TED Talk, as part of the opening of the APAC Wind Energy Summit. So could you tell our listeners, how important is the Australian market to Vestas?
Yeah. I hope I have the ability to excite people at the small talk in the beginning. I definitely look forward to joining the summit. It's going to be a pivotal summit, and I think necessary also at this time to showcase not just Australia and the importance of Australia, and I can get back to that, but also the rest of the region in terms of developing the wind industry these years. I mean, there's no doubt Australia for Vestas is a highly strategic market. Onshore wise, it's one of our most important markets, and also looking into the future, the plans that the current government has in place, the ambition levels, and just the sheer magnitude of the focus that the Australian government has on developing its wind resources. It just makes it obvious for a company like Vestas to be playing a very crucial role in the Australian market. So, I mean, for me, it's absolutely important to be at the summit and also use the summit to highlight some of the points where it can also improve for the industry. That's important.
Sure. And so, I mean, your footprint is pretty strong in the market. I mean, you've had projects there. Been doing a project there for pretty much ever since the market. I guess you were probably one of the early movers into that market. You've had, at least at some point, you've had facilities in Australia as well. You've got there's a big Vestas headquarters in Melbourne as well. So it's an important. Melbourne itself is important for Vestas, or Victoria is an important state and city for Vestas. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's one of our key hubs. If you look at our global footprint. That's Australia, and Melbourne plays an important role for us, especially in our APAC region. And yes, we've been there since the beginning of the market. And as most markets, there has been booms and busts and ups and downs. But I would say for the last many years, there's been a real consistency in Australia, and that is what makes Australia, I think, stand out compared to a lot of the big wind markets around the world. I mean, you can look at the US right now, where there is this consistency in policy, and where there is this broad support for the clean tech sector, and also a very engaged government that really listens and really wants to improve. And I think that's why it's so crucial for us to all show up in September, because we know we have good friends and partners in Australia, and they actually take our advice seriously.
Yeah, and I know that when I hear comments from the various state governments, that all of the states, without exception, see that onshore wind has a huge role to play in the energy transition. So if Australia is going to get to this net zero, onshore wind is going to be a critical part of that. But there are some challenges, I guess, with onshore wind where, whether it be community engagement or development or grid connections or getting the energy from generation to load centre, etc. What are some of the issues that you're seeing in Australia around onshore wind? And do you see these as having any or coming up in other markets within the APAC region?
As you say, I mean, the the, the wind resources in Australia, that no one can doubt the enormity of the resource they have. They're plentiful of land, and the demand for electricity. All these factors together obviously makes Australia an enormously important onshore market. I'm not saying offshore is not important in Australia. I think down the line it's definitely going to come. But if you look at the potential for onshore in Australia, it's absolutely massive. And you're right. There are some issues that we can recognize from many other markets. There are, grid connection issues. There are, slow permitting times that, and approval processes can be cumbersome, and all these things we see in many other places. What I like is that if you look at the government's pledges in terms of putting investments into grid upgrades and new high ultra voltage lines, etc., etc. I mean, they are consistently saying all the right things, and I think speed of implementation, of course, is key. But I think the Australian government, by and large, have recognized sort of some of the bottlenecks, and I think it's up for us in the industry to come, show our face, put our arguments on the table, do the engagement. I think a summit like the APAC Summit in September is a key avenue, forum for us to do that. So yes, potential is enormous. Challenges are recognizable, but we have a government and we have state governments that acknowledges the challenges, and they're willing to listen to us. So I think it's important we show up and play our constructive part.
Sure. In relation to the O&M sector, Australia's a huge country, and having a service fleet that I guess has to service parks all over the country, etc. How much of a challenge is the O&M piece for Australia, and how is Vestas tackling this? Are you having full lifetime service agreements? Are you chopping that up and getting like third-party service providers to chip in as well? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, we have a lot of options on the table when it comes to our service offerings. I think by and large, we're very flexible when it comes to our customer engagement and what is needed. That Australia is unique in many ways. Some of the the distances to sites are unique, and the size of projects are unique, at least compared to European projects. So there are lots of unique elements in Australia that makes it challenging for an OEM. Competition is quite fierce as well. So it has all the ingredients that makes it a dynamic market for an OEM. But that's just part of the life of being an OEM in Australia.
Yeah, sure. You've also had some experience in some hybrid projects down there. I think from memory that you guys were one of the first, if not the first, to do a wind, solar, battery sort of project, maybe in Queensland, was it?
Yeah, I think Australia has there's also a very keen interest to experiment. And also when you engage with regulators and policymakers, they're very interested in finding solutions where battery storage finds its natural complementary life with renewables, and you can see huge battery projects also going up. I think Australia, together with California, are in the lead in terms of utilizing huge grid scale battery storage solutions, etc. So from an experimentation point of view, pointing to the way to the future of renewable energy and creating these clean baseload system, Australia is an incredibly important player as well. So there are many aspects to why Australia is interesting, and we've done our fair share of experimenting as well with R&D concepts in Australia. And I think also, I mean, when it comes to our offerings within grid services, etc. And I think our Australia teams is probably where we are most advanced as well. So, I mean, Australia has a lot of room for those kinds of novel and new ideas on how to improve the OEM business case also. So many exciting developments can happen in Australia with the focus that they have, and that's another good reason why we need to have a discussion in September when we all meet up in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's interesting. having grown up in Australia, I guess from an Australian perspective, we always think that Australia is quite a resourceful country because, when distance has kept you pretty much separated from the rest of the world, if you can't find a solution yourself, then that doesn't get solved. So I guess it's interesting to see that sort of pioneering spirit has also come out
Oh,
into the
absolutely.
wind industry. And so if you look at, from a turbine manufacturer perspective, if you look at your footprint throughout the APAC region, how important is, I get that the Australian market is important, but I mean, we all know, like we see in the US, that if you're just reliant on one market in a region, if that market goes away for whatever reason, there becomes a huge hole in your in your supply chain or in like within your factories. You've got underutilized factories, etc. How important is getting some sort of like regional collaboration, or at least having a regional discussion around the APAC region to be able to maybe harmonise some of that demand, or at least make other countries aware of what's going on in each market, so we kind of get a feel for how this region's developing to make sure we can ride through any dips in any one particular market.
Yeah, and I think that important, especially on the offshore side. I think that's incredibly important, right? And we've had discussions in also GWEC initiated, or the Global Offshore Wind Alliance. I hope we'll have a chance to sit down in that alliance in Melbourne. I don't know if that's the plan, Stewart, but last meeting we had, we talked about this APAC collaboration, especially regarding offshore, where places like Taiwan, Korea, Japan, Australia could really, even Vietnam, could really benefit from creating this collaboration, as you've seen in Europe, for example, around the North Sea, where we have these 9 countries trying to harmonize legislation around offshore, but also creating a better structure around when offshore projects are deployed, simply for the OEM side to have a better sort of planning horizon. And I think the whole region in Australia especially also could benefit from engaging in such a conversation with the other offshore players in the larger Asia Pacific region.
Okay, so does that mean that I get that and I accept that, and yes, there will be a global offshore wind alliance moment as well. So thank you for bringing that into the conversation. But just focusing on the onshore thing, does that mean then there's probably not the same importance for that sort of regional collaboration, or I mean, because the individual markets are so specific and the volumes are so large in each of the individual markets that it's probably not worth it having the conversation regionally? How does that work?
It's always important to learn from each other. I mean, I think if I look back at the last couple of years, I think one of the largest contributors to me being busy with delegations coming into Denmark has actually been Australia. And so I see a huge, and they're coming to Denmark, among other things, to look at onshore development and the larger regional collaboration structure we have in Europe. So Australia definitely has this mindset of learning from other countries and integrating that into their own specific situation. I think that's always worth it, but from a purely supply chain point of view, I think offshore is where there's definitely a broader need for regional collaboration.
And following up again in the offshore, maybe both on and offshore space, are you seeing that developers or your customers, are they trying to do sort of like framework deals with you for a lot of different countries at once, or are they still looking at bespoke projects one by one?
It really depends on the customer, I would say. I mean, you have them in all shapes and forms. And in Australia, you have the complexity of having very large customers and smaller developers, and you have the whole variety of customers there, which again is what makes it interesting and dynamic. But in general, sort of our commercial terms and contractual terms with customers, probably we have to keep it out of the podcast.
Okay, fine. We can do that. We can not focus on that bit. Yeah, but so in that case, if I could give you 3 wishes for the APAC region, or maybe for Australia or the APAC region, that you would like to see, if you could change any 3 things, or to help accelerate or to give greater certainty around the projects actually coming to life, what's the top 3 on your bucket list or on your wish list there?
I think for Australia specifically, permitting time is one of the things that we need to discuss when we meet up in Melbourne. And I think for the larger region, offshore collaboration and in places like Japan and Korea, looking at how we can get to larger projects, I think is one of the key conversations on offshore. Because the financial structures and the supply chain issues, etc., it's important that we move in that direction. And then I think it's great that we're going to have a large Vietnamese delegation coming to the summit, because finally, Vietnam is, it's a sleeping giant when it comes to renewable energy, and I know we've all been there many times, and GWEC has done a fantastic job in supporting the Vietnamese government, but it's getting there now, right? Vietnam is coming back, and it's getting its structure in place, and both on and offshore will have a bright future in Vietnam for sure. But what the conversation we need to have beyond those markets, what is happening? Because yes, Korea, Japan, Taiwan are moving on offshore. Australia is a key market. Vietnam come back. But where are we with the Philippines, the Indonesia, the Thailands of this world? And how do we get the full family of friends in the region to get to that point where we get the whole region to move in the right direction? And I think if there's one big wish for me at the conference, it's actually to look at those countries that are still trying to find its feet and get to a point where volume can take off. How do we help them get to that point, and how do we as an industry contribute to that conversation? I think that is actually the most important thing for me.
And so what can people expect to hear as you maybe can give a little bit of an indication of what you're going to cover in your Rex talk? Have you got any pearls of wisdom or any themes developing, or are they still percolating in the background? And we've still got, as we're speaking today, we've still got 6 and a bit weeks to the conference. So maybe you're not, maybe you've got other speeches to give before ours. I don't know if you've given any thought to that yet.
Me, if I stand up in front of an audience of policymakers, I try to be as constructive as possible in formulating, advice into small gold nuggets. But if I stand up in front of an audience of industry peers and colleagues, then what I like to focus on is how we as a collective become better at advising policymakers. And I'm sure you can expect me to say something around those lines, maybe both of those things. But the content of my small talk will have to be revealed when I'm on the stage.
Look, thank you very much, Morten, for joining us. And listeners, if you'd like to hear more of Morten, if you'd like to hear some of those pearls of wisdom or those little gold nuggets as they actually develop over time, make sure that you grab your tickets for the APAC Summit. They're still available now. Remember, the APAC Summit is in Melbourne on September 16 to 18. It's at the Melbourne Convention and Exhibition Centre. So for those local in Victoria, that's down at Jeff's Shed. There's delegations coming in from the Philippines, Vietnam, Korea, Japan. We're looking at getting some New Zealanders over. There's going to be some Americans there, a large contingent of Europeans, some Indians. So it's going to be a real multicultural show. So we really hope that you get on board and join the discussion, and we look forward to seeing you there. Again, Morten, thanks very much for your time.
Real pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you and everyone else at the summit next month.
Thanks for listening. If you like what you've heard, there's more of that and many more discussions to be had at the APAC Wind Energy Summit on the 16th to the 18th of September at the Melbourne Exhibition and Convention Centre. GWEC will be there with a host of thought leaders from around the industry, having discussions around onshore wind, offshore wind, O&M, and much, much more. Make sure you pick up your tickets today, and we look forward to seeing you there.